Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Knowledge Building for Leaders. And today our topic is meaningful read alouds. So just a reminder of our core values, the Cox Campus Way. You see that we value rewarding, empowering, connecting, safe, and essential practices. So we want this experience to be rewarding for all. We want to empower all to secure a better future for our children through literacy. And we are committed to connecting with our change agents. And we want all to feel safe and welcome and accepted. And we are rooted in solid research to help change practices and make a difference in the lives of our children. So that is our Cox Campus Way. And we always want to start with that grounding. So if this is your first Knowledge Building for Leaders session, please know that these sessions come with pre-work that is required. To fully participate in the session, you will have needed to complete the Meaningful Read Aloud session on Cox Campus. If you have not completed that course, consider joining our next course. And the pre-work for the next course will be completing writing instruction in K3. So again, today our focus is meaningful read alouds. And I am one of your facilitators, and we have two more facilitators who will be co-hosting this session. We want to build your knowledge of foundational literacy through our free online Cox Campus structured literacy courses. So to set the foundation for transformational change in your school and in your district, we are inviting you to jump in with lively, reflective discussions with our peer leaders and our facilitators by both the Rollins Center and Godot. So our facilitators today are Amy Denty, and she is from the Georgia Department of Education, Director of Literacy, Ramona Brown, and she is with the Rollins Center, Field Implementation Coordinator, and I am Jacinta McCants, Implementation Coach at the Rollins Center. So you will have moderators in your breakout rooms too. So just keep in mind that you may see a facilitator or a moderator in your breakout room later on so that we can continue the lively discussions. All right, time for some fun. I want us to think back on our favorite read alouds. So when you were in the classroom or the last time you visited a classroom and saw a great read aloud, we would like you to type in the chat that title of that read aloud that really hit home and just brought the class to life and gave some great engaging conversations happening in the classroom. So if you can type in the chat your favorite read aloud. And let me see, can I get someone to read the chat for me?
I got you as soon as they start coming in. Good morning, everyone.
Wonderful.
All right, they are rolling in. The Fire Cat.
Okay.
If you give a pig a pancake, the one and only Ivan, the day the crayons quit, the hickory chair. Oh, I love that. She says it makes her cry every time she reads it. A bad case of stripes. No good, very bad day. I'll love you forever. Too much glue. Watercress. Any Patricia Polacco. I agree. The keeping quilt. Yes, Patricia Polacco. If you give a mouse a cookie, thank you, Mr. Foster. That's one of my favorites as well. It's a hard choice for me to choose a favorite. As a second grade teacher, I feel like a former second grade teacher, feel like you get to read all the greats. Chrysanthemum and the true story of the Three Little Pigs. Yes, all the classics are present. Recess Queen. Cool. Keep them coming.
Yes, take us down memory lane. I love it. But yeah, a lot of those are my favorites too. Those are some great ones. Wonderful. So basically that's what we're going to kind of jump into, our read alouds, and hopefully bring back some memories of great read alouds that you've done with your children or with your students, or you've seen in classrooms recently. So all of those should bring back some great memories. I love read alouds. It's one of my favorites. All right, so grounding us in the work, we're going to have Amy Denty kind of talk to us about reading comprehension and our objectives for today. So Amy, take it away.
Good morning, everybody. I'm so excited about this discussion about read alouds today and how important it is, and I'm excited to learn together with you all. This literacy journey that we're on, sometimes it feels new because we're having a lot of attention focused on the importance of literacy, and that's great because it gives us a chance to pull in all of our stakeholders. But we know that we've been doing some good work regarding literacy for a long time. And so sometimes it feels like we're just continuing with the work and continuing with the journey. But I'm thrilled to have so many of you all on with us today to learn together. I know that this is a terribly busy time during the school year where you have one foot in this school year and one foot in next school year. And some of you are probably in the middle of high stakes testing. And so thank you so much for making this a priority to join with us so that we can learn together today and really engage as a network so that we can enhance our network, find new people to collaborate with as we all work hard on this journey of literacy. And also part of our work here today is really about preparing for the changes that are required by the Georgia Early Literacy Act, Senate Bill 48, which is Georgia's dyslexia legislation. And so, a big part of those pieces of legislation is professional learning. And so your presence here shows us that you're ready to support your teachers in the important work of professional learning. So those are our goals for today. And I think now we'll look specifically at the session objectives. Sam, can I get you to change that slide, please? Thank you. So we are reflecting today on what we learned in meaningful read alouds for vocabulary and oral language comprehension. And let me just say this because I've already responded to someone in the chat. I know that our original schedule had that we would be talking about assessment today. We had to change that a few months ago because our partners at the Rollins Center are revising the assessment module. And so we swapped this out. And I apologize for any of you who did not get that message. But hang with us. I think you'll still get a lot out of the conversation. And but we are going to be talking about meaningful read alouds today. As always, we're going to lean into what this looks like when implemented in a school. We know that implementation piece is so important and often the most challenging. And so we're going to help you link to what you learned to a real life scenario, and we'll have some robust conversation around that. And you'll also leave with a coaching tool that will help you to establish some baseline data in your school. So I'm excited about getting started with meaningful read alouds today.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. All right, so we're going to our next activity, which is called Stop, Caution, Go. So what we would like you to do is reflect on the course and think about these three big ideas or big ticket items here. What do you need to stop and rethink from the course? So what are some practices that you see that might need to stop and kind of morph into something else when it comes to read alouds and reading comprehension? And then think about, where do you feel you should proceed with caution on some things? And then what are you ready to green light or ready to just jump in and go? So think about what you've seen in the classrooms or what you have been doing in the classrooms that might need to stop and morph into something else, or maybe think about cautiously proceeding with it, or some things that you've learned from the course that you're ready to jump right in and go for it and use some of these great practices in your classroom or in your districts. So just a quick whole group discussion. We're not going to jump into breakout rooms or anything. And you can come off of chat or come off the mic, or you can type in the chat. So however you feel comfortable in having this discussion, you can unmute yourselves and talk, or you can type in the chat. So after taking the course, we're reflecting on some things that might need to stop happening, some things that we might need to pump the brakes on, and some things that we're ready to just roll with and keep going in the right direction. So if somebody can help me with the chat, and any of our facilitators or participants can kind of jump into this.
I got you on the chat.
Perfect.
I've got this further confirmed the importance of reading aloud to your class every day. Yes, I love that, Amy. I say every day that a child has lunch, they should be read to and they should write. Stop the lack of think aloud metacognitive modeling by teachers during read aloud. Yes, those think alouds are essential to model for our students what is invisible to them unless we do the think aloud. Awesome.
Great conversations. And I like that emphasis on every day, read alouds every day. So that might be something someone is already green light and ready to go. And that might be something that we need to kind of support our teachers in doing and knowing what that looks like and how that looks. So I love that piece.
A caution: provide more teacher clarity on comprehension strategies versus comprehension skills. Yes, that can be a challenge, especially thinking about the literature that we read. A go is it is important to utilize a format when planning effective, purposeful read alouds. I love the use of the words both effective and purposeful. Absolutely. Absolutely. They can still feel good to read, but we want to make sure that they are effective. A go, read with a book in hand more. Caution: asking students questions during the read aloud, not just afterward, but without reading aloud becoming a quiz experience. That is so essential. Thank you, Nick, for that reminder. We've got Jessica from Gwinnett. Go, interactive read alouds can be powerful at all levels for all students. The range of skills that can be supported via strategic read alouds is vast. Beautifully put, Jessica. I think sometimes we forget that our fourth and fifth graders and even middle schoolers, all the way up, can benefit from those interactive read alouds. It facilitates community, conversation. So you're right. It is the possibilities are endless.
I love how these are setting us up so well for our real life scenario that we're going to encounter later in our session today. These
Absolutely. Good connection. The last one in here is caution: introduce vocabulary and review vocabulary and meaning before, during, and after the read alouds. Yes, exposure is not deep enough. We have to constantly keep that top of mind. Using think aloud stems and using safety nets to lift students' oral language connected to answering comprehension questions. Great way to link the importance of oral language here in the read aloud, which is a rich playground, if you will, or space to facilitate the oral language. Caution: don't assume kids know it. Explain, 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 and build background knowledge. Absolutely. Thank you, Bartow County. Yes, that goes to that explicit instruction.
Excellent, excellent. Those are great points. I love it. Love that connection with oral language.
Mhm.
Definitely, definitely.
And remember, the
Okay.
mic is open. I've heard my voice, but
Right?
if there's anyone.
I love that last comment about building background knowledge. And so we know how important vocabulary and background knowledge is to building strong literacy. And we know that our children come to us, our students come to us with varying, just different background knowledge. And I always found that sometimes level setting with a read aloud was a great way to give students a common experience in building that background knowledge. So I love that comment from Bartow County.
Excellent. Wonderful. Thank you so much for that conversation and all of the comments in the chat. So yeah, this definitely sets us up for our breakout session later on for our real life scenarios. So that's going to be some great conversations. I can't wait. But we have another great enthusiastic piece to our session, and I'll let Ramona Brown jump into that piece.
All right. Hello, everyone. I am pleased to introduce Dr. Nick Philman. He's been a regular guest sharing the Marietta story for several sessions this year. Nick, Dr. Philman gives evidence-based literacy instruction, professional learning, and curriculum development for Marietta City's elementary schools. In addition to working side by side with teachers and literacy coaches, his role involves facilitating collaboration among district departments, as well as between district leaders and vital external partners such as the 95% Group, Rollins Center, Learn for Life, and Literacy How. Dr. Philman has worked with students or teachers in every grade, pre-K through 12. As an elementary homeroom teacher, literacy arts teacher, gifted specialist, literacy coach, and state endorsement instructor. In January, he was recruited by the Georgia Department of Education to develop and lead a statewide literacy coaching model that scales coaching aspects of the work happening in Marietta City to districts throughout Georgia. So without further ado, the next voice that you will hear is Dr. Nick Philman. Welcome.
Hey, thank you so much, Ramona. Just hearing that makes me tired, but you all know very well how much it takes to get this work happening for kids and how important it is to impact as many kids as possible, as quickly as possible. When I hear that read back, that's exactly what I hear is just students all the way through it. If you were here during the last webinar, I believe, I talked about the shifts, big picture in Marietta around comprehension and our moves from standards-based instruction to knowledge building instruction. I want to lean into that piece a little bit deeper today to really focus on the instructional read aloud part of it. So if we can slide forward a slide. Beautiful. So what you see laid out on the screen are Marietta City last summer created in-house what we call knowledge building units, or KBUs, that run kindergarten through fifth grade. We intentionally in Marietta City put the training for teachers ahead of the purchase of a core reading program. Our superintendent, Dr. Rivera, was all about people before programs and the fact that our teachers have to be smarter than any resource that we put in front of them. We also did not have at that time a core reading program district wide. We're a former school of choice dynamic in Marietta City. So every principal sort of made their own decisions around what they wanted to use for reading comprehension. So we had a varied landscape. So our first step before purchasing a core program, though, was to make sort of a tier one district-wide resource that everybody could use and all be on the same page. The structure of those KBUs align very closely with what we saw in the Cox campus modules, with some little tweaks along the way. Before we look at a specific knowledge building unit, I just wanted to sort of call out the fact that on the screen, you see that we really did lean in the knowledge building direction. There is social studies content, science content within each of these 10 or 15-day plans, but then also some KBUs that are specific to literature genre. So you notice that in K1, 2, and 3, every one of those grades started the year in a folk tales or a storytelling place. So a lot of times there is a misconception that knowledge building means that you're teaching social studies or you're teaching science. You are building knowledge every time you sit down and do an instructional read aloud with students. It's all about just being intentional about what you want to really focus on and explicitly call out in each of those lessons. And Sam, if you can click on that image for me. Go back a slide and just click on the table. Hey, there we go. So my example today is this similar stories, different versions unit from second grade. I chose second grade because it's kind of down the middle for this kindergarten, third grade place, and because I really wanted to highlight the fact that knowledge building isn't always just social studies or science standards. So I want to walk through a little bit of the structure of how we build these, but then go really deeply into the instructional read aloud component of it. If you'll slide down to slide 3 for me. So when we start thinking about being really explicit with our instructions, the way that our 15-day plans are laid out, and this is really similar to a way a lot of the knowledge building curricula programs that we reviewed. Marietta City is actually adopting a program this upcoming year. We're planning our PD for it right now. But they all really highlight this same approach of having chunks of lessons that instead of in the past, we would have been like week 1 main idea, week 2 character interactions, week 3 mood and theme. Instead, our weeks or our sets of 5 days are set up around different knowledge buckets. So cultural representation in the different versions, using specific elements, how the author uses word choice, and how the story is engaging in different ways. So that's our 3 essential questions that guide our lessons across each of those weeks, and they stack on each other is a part of the being explicit. You see that we do have the vocabulary called out. They are embedded in each of the lessons, which I will focus on in just a moment. This is our map out of the whole 15 days. So it's really important to keep in mind when we think about building knowledge and giving students access to complex text. One of the things in Marietta that we really had to face was in the past, we did a lot of reading instruction and we did read alouds. However, those two things did not always talk to each other. A lot of our read alouds were just for fun read alouds, or a teacher would read aloud a book that was being used in a reading instruction lesson because the kids couldn't access it. So it was almost used as a remediation and just a connection engagement piece. Remediation and engagement are both incredibly important components, but they are not the only function of a read aloud. So we really had to explicitly move from just read alouds to instructional read alouds. Part of that shift for us was taking on Lupo's work around the quad text set. So what you see represented here are the different types of text within a quad text set. We have our visual text that is really just learning from images, music, primary resources in the social studies world. Our hook text that could be a little less complex, a little more accessible to kids. And the hook text is literally there just for fun. It is there to get them engaged. It's the hook part of your unit. The informational text is a text that is somewhat accessible. It is closer to the student's reading level while also building up to that grade level reading expectation. And it is a piece of the puzzle, is like the way I like to talk about that with teachers, rather than being the entirety of the essential question for that week. It's one of the jigsaw pieces. And then the target text is the most complex. We really look at raising the bar with that target text. We typically shoot for 2 or 3 grade levels above grade level reading lexile wise for the kids so that they have built some background knowledge and some vocabulary using the other 3 types of text. So by the time we reach that target text, they are really ready to like grapple with it and dive in. I know there's another common misconception that the whole explicit instruction piece takes away the productive struggle aspect of reading. That is not true. It just really focuses on the productive part of that productive struggle. You have to do things for the kids to build their abilities to now take on this really weighty text. And I want to dive into one of those really weighted texts right now. If you could click on Burger Framework lesson for me on that day 2, or you can go forward in slides. Either one will work. Hey, beautiful. So we use in Marietta City an approach called the Burger Framework, B-E-R, not B-U-R. And the way this framework works, it's really similar to START in that there's a ton of planning the teacher has to do before they ever even open the book in front of the students. I know it is a very simple aha, but it's an aha that I have to remind teachers about pretty often, that you must read a book to yourself before you read a book to children. And not just to make sure it doesn't have cuss words or any pictures of like no David's little bottom that you're not going to show to the first grade kids. It's really because you have to understand the book that you're going to teach, and you have to understand the content and what is going to trip the kids up. Because if you have chosen an appropriately complex text for an instructional read aloud, there should be elements of that text that the students will have to grapple with. If you're really pushing yourself to have to figure out the problems to be addressed or the vocabulary that needs to be previewed, then you probably haven't chosen a complex enough text. That would then become more of an informational text than a target text. So you see here, the top 3 boxes are all the pre-work that a teacher, the thinking work that a teacher has to do, what the student is going to get out of the reading, different problems inside the text. For example, figurative language, puffed up proud you can't really get that from the context of the sentence. You really have to be able to either pre-teach that or be ready with your sticky note to jump in and talk about puffed up proud rather than just blowing past it, because I, as a 46-year-old, know what that means. The 6-year-olds sitting in front of me likely do not, and they deserve the opportunity to have that explained for them so that when they see it somewhere else in text, they actually can take it on. And then the familiar nouns used as a verb, we talked about troubled you so. Trouble for a student is typically a noun. They don't very often hear troubled used as a verb. So that was another little example of a phrase that we really had to dig into. It's also a great example of the fact that doing this work collaboratively is so much more valuable than sitting down on your own on your couch and just trying to figure out all of this burger framework part. Because some people in the room, again, even as adults, blew right past that. It really took one coach who was helping design this to point out that troubled was used in a different part of speech right there. So I always encourage people to take this work on with their team, don't fly solo. The prerequisite vocabulary box is a nice example of the different tiers of vocabulary that were discussed in the Cox module. That transferable vocabulary is our tier 2. So those are words that students don't likely hear every day, but that they will likely hear in other text, either in other content areas or other texts that have a similar theme. Those are words that they need to file away in their mental dictionary or their lexicon to be able to pull them out at a later date. Whereas that next line, the cultural specific vocabulary, is really that tier 3 vocabulary. Students will not likely, especially since this is a second grade book, will not likely encounter bébé and bonjour and grand maison over and over again in different texts, but those words are important to be able for them to understand this book. So those would typically be the words that we would introduce before the lesson so that by the time they got to them, they would know them, or that we would just flag and know for ourselves that we would pause and do a tiny little light touch there. Whereas the tier 2 transferable vocabulary, we would use something more similar to the vocabulary routine that we saw in the Cox module to really go deeply and make sure that they have a deeper understanding of those words. All of that top part is the pre-work that teachers really just have to think about, but then also capture in writing, right? The bottom half of this framework lesson are what actually happens during the instructional read aloud. So the before, we want to set the stage, discuss backgrounds about Cinderella stories. We realized really quickly in some of our schools, I know at the beginning somebody called out in the chat, assume nothing, explain, explain, explain. It is really easy to assume that second graders know the Cinderella story. However, I used to say, depending on where you come from in the world, because we have a high migrant population, but even some of our kids who were born and raised right here in Marietta City may never have heard the different fairy tales that a lot of us heard kind of day to day growing up. That it's becoming less of an experience that kids have at home, and to be honest, even in some of our preschool environments. So we cannot assume that students come preloaded with all of that fairy tale and nursery rhyme information. So we have to kind of front load that and go deeper into it with our kids. The visualizing mental model is a really important piece for getting them to not only think about what they're learning through a content lens, but also bringing in that metacognitive aspect of how they're going to be thinking, the connections between the learning. And in this particular story, we used a really common literature approach of somebody wanted, but so then. And we start that with them right out of the gate before, that way they have it in their mind. And then throughout the book, we'll kind of revisit it over and over again. Slide down to the during for me. Beautiful. And I know I put this as a caution in the chat. It was a learning curve for us. I will own the fact that even as a literary arts teacher who taught students public speaking, theater, and poetry, I was very commonly making the mistake of introducing a book, getting kids excited about it, reading the book, doing my own think alouds, but then saving all the questions for the end of the book for the kids. And we do it out of the goodness of our heart because we want them engaged with the book and not stopping and breaking out of that storytelling experience. But what that does is really turns the questions at the end into a test instead of this like interactive, engaging questioning part of it. But you can also go too far the other direction. And if every page that you turn has a sticky note with a question for a kid, now you've turned it into a little tiny milestones test, is what you've done, right? So really being thoughtful and intentional about where you pause and answer those questions, and varying the types of questions. So you see some literal, some inferential, depending on the book. There can also be evaluative questions. So really just mapping out, and you see there that we have the day 1, day 2 situation, which is really similar to the repeated reading that we learn about in Cox Campus modules. I'll also call out there, and it's great work that we've done with our Rollins partners all the way through. The fact that Marietta has taken the learning that we've done inside of the Cox Campus modules in Top 10 Tools is another platform that we used, and applied that to our instruction rather than just downloading the start template and filling in the start template. The theory here is exactly what is covered in the modules, but we've contextualized it and are using that theoretical pedagogical understanding in a way that makes sense for our teachers and can connect with our kids. And then, of course, at the very end, we have our after reading product, where in this one, they are going to always revisit their someone wanted but so then. You can scroll down to that bottom box for me. Awesome. They are going to collaboratively contrast, because that's the big content they're trying to get out of this, is how different cultures have presented the different Cinderella stories, when really it's a bigger picture than that. It's not just being able to compare, contrast Cinderella stories. It's being able to find comparisons and contrast with any literature that they take on, while also building that literacy knowledge background piece that we see at the top of Scarborough's Road. So big picture, that's what our instructional read aloud process looks like. And if you'll click back over to the slides for me really quick, I just wanted to point out what we do for our teachers is we provide the teachers with the lessons somewhat, right? Because we always want our teachers also to be able to do the work on their own and apply this to other books. We are very, very clear with our teachers that if you have a beloved book that builds the same knowledge, engages the students to a similar degree, and is a similar complexity to a text in this plan, they are welcome and encouraged to trade out and use a different text inside of here, bringing all the training that we've done for them to bear to then plan that lesson out in the same way. So in no way do I want to communicate that we require lockstep that our teachers use every single one of these lessons necessarily. They know how to do it, but at the same time, I would rather a teacher's time and attention and energy be focused on connecting a lesson to a student than having to go out and find all of their own books and write every single lesson from scratch. So we give them a starting point, but then we definitely empower them to do it on their own as well. I am happy to answer any questions that brought up for anybody, or that can happen at a later time.
Oops. Excellent. Thank you so much, Nick. I was just writing down a few nuggets that connected to our stop, caution, and go. I heard you talk about purposeful instructional read alouds, knowledge building as being essential, as well as that explicit instruction. And thank you for naming the 4 different types of text and what the nuances were in selecting them, as well as naming the fact that yes, productive struggle is important. However, this shift is more on the productive rather than the struggle when we're talking about complex texts. I could go on, but I won't. As for questions, after near the end, after our breakout room sessions, we will allow participants an opportunity to ask you questions if you make yourself available. And Sam, I think we're ready for our real life scenario. Thank you.
Can I name one more thing really quickly? I know it's hard for me to stop.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
When I was saying making sure that the switch out lesson engages students to a similar degree, one of our lessons learned in Marietta was when we really focused on instructional read aloud, the teachers became the owner of the text, because we think of read aloud just means the teacher is the one doing all of the reading. So it meant less books in kids' hands. That was a course correction that we had to do really quickly. And we really then focused on the 3 R's. So yes, there's read aloud, but there's also read along, where the kid has a copy of the book themselves as well. And then there's read alone, where we have now read this text. You go off with a partner or by yourself or a small group and reread this exact same thing that we have read together. So I just wanted to call that out as kind of a lesson to learn, that an instructional read aloud does not always mean that the teacher is the only one decoding the text.
Excellent distinction. It made me think about the gradual release process as well. Thank you so much. All right, so now is our opportunity to link your learning to real life scenarios. Our scenario for this session is during a district walkthrough, you don't observe any read alouds happening across the school. The principal shares that there isn't enough time in the school schedule and read alouds should only be happening in pre-K. How do you support this principle in understanding the importance of read alouds across any grade levels? So that's our scenario. Sam is going to put us into breakout rooms for the next 30 minutes. We'll have an opportunity to learn and get into deep discussion around this real life scenario. And when we come back, you'll have an opportunity we'll have an opportunity for a few folks to share some key points from their discussion. So Sam, if you would begin the breakout rooms, you should have an invitation popping up on your screen. As soon as you see that, just go ahead and click join. See you in the big room in 30 minutes. All right, not quite 30 minutes, but I think we had some rich discussion, and I would love to hear from some of the other facilitators and or participants in the breakout room. What were some key topics that were listed as ways to support this principle in shifting their thinking?
I'll go ahead and share. So in our group, we had Dawson representation, Clayton, Henry, and Brooks County represented, also Marietta City Schools. And it was such, let me tell you, so much good conversation. It was amazing. But with the help of our discussion, our rich discussion, Nick summarized our discussion with alliteration, of course, with map it. I'm sorry, it was model it. So modeling what it looks like, maybe bringing someone from going into the classroom, I'm sorry, and having maybe like a 5th grade class where you may see, okay, it doesn't live in only pre-K. Let me show you what that looks like in other classes. Map it out, like break it down for them and show what the meaning, some of the meaningful pieces that can happen during that time. Make it fun, engaging. We are really competing against all things technology. And so we need to like bring the excitement and engaging piece. There was conversation about incorporating different family engagement, conversation, all of that kind of stuff in there, merge it to different, to several standards. We need to understand that this is not a separate entity to our learning. This is already embedded and integrated in different components of our learning that's already happening. If you think about how one book can address so many different parts of the standards, it actually will save you time instead of taking away from that time, right? And then the last one we added was magic happens. And so it's so much amazingness that happens with it. We talked about how the end result usually in comprehension, but it's also really connection. And think about how reading that read aloud and being engulfed in so many different conversations and culturally responsive opportunities that can live in these spaces, that's when the magic really happens. And so that part is really, really good. I want to just add to that in that modeling, something that was mentioned, and that modeling is expanding that knowledge-based piece and understanding the why. So as we support the principle and understanding the importance, that's embedded in that modeling. Team, did I get that correct? I think I kind of captured that really good.
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Christine, for that recap. I'm gonna read a couple of offerings in the chat, and then we'll also have some space for anyone else that would like to share, come off mic and share. Our group loved the KBU framework and how it allowed for expert educator autonomy. Yes, Caroline, I wrote down teacher choice. as part of it, giving them the understanding so that they're able to make wise decisions when choosing a read aloud. She also says that read alouds are relevant for all grade levels to build background knowledge and vocabulary. We are working to spread that understanding across schools and classrooms. Yes, vital information. Rebecca said, I love that Angie, the MTSS coordinator from room 2, said start with data, look at research, plan for making the shifts. She and her team are planning to make these shifts in the summer, not just for K2, but working with 3rd through 5th as well. Awesome. Jacinta says, we had great conversations from Habersham, Gwinnett, Jasper, Gap SC, and we recommended modeling, debriefing after observation of read alouds, support knowledge building of our leaders through Q&A, coaching, mentoring, and training. Boy, these comments are rolling in. Room 9 had a great discussion. Lost it because it rolled. 1 second. Had a great discussion regarding what a high leverage practice and interactive read aloud can be when planned intentionally and with a specific purpose. Oral language, comprehension, fluency, and critical thinking are all lifted. I must also shout out the collaboration happening among the members of the room. Yay! They were sharing so many great things about their work on Cox campus and how they are keeping their learning organized. Love it, Stephanie. Thanks for lifting that. All right. I think those are the new Nick added, autonomy with guardrails has become my mantra for empowering teachers while keeping us all grounded in the science. Yes, there are boundaries in nature, and there need to be boundaries that are well defined for our work in order to keep us along the path to impact students. I'll share real quick from my room, some of the things that were lifted were the opportunities for rich vocabulary, supporting the principal by providing research through articles, podcasts, a particular research piece by Molly Ness that talked about the importance of read alouds even through high school, the engagement that takes place, community building. It was also lifted that it's important to help students have time to process it in writing or verbally, and how that time to process helps them to articulate their ideas as well as organize their ideas. And then the conversation skills that seems to be a lost art in our world of texting and social media, just having conversation around ideas in order to gain perspective and make meaning and learn about yourself and the world. Anyone else like to come off mute and share?
Ramona, I'll share from, I think we were room 2, maybe. We had a small group that's some great ideas. And just to piggyback on what you were just talking about how quality read alouds can really impact the oral language of students and to get students talking about the text and beyond. And one of our group members shared that she observed when their school began doing read alouds very intentionally, that she observed that even during recess, that children were, rather instead of playing kickball or whatever the norm was at recess, that they were gathering up to talk about what might happen next in the story or what happened that day during the read aloud. And just thinking about getting children talking and using language to express their ideas, that's a win in itself. And so we had a good conversation about that. Also had some conversation about the difference sometimes, many times volunteers want to come in and conduct read alouds for us, and that we have to put some, I loved what Nick said about guardrails. Sometimes we've got to put some guardrails around that, because as our teachers are doing read alouds, they're really instructional read alouds. And so there is sometimes a difference between those instructional read alouds that are very intentional and well planned, and when a volunteer may come in and do a read aloud. We have a
Amy,
great group.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because that was another one of our learning curve pieces. Is it's really easy to take a pendulum swift all the way a new direction. And we had schools who either temporarily, I don't want to say banned, but temporarily backed off of volunteers coming in and doing read alouds, when that is not the intention. Like, the engagement piece, especially to the community, is still such a major thing. And we also had different schools who were wanting to hand these volunteer visitors a burger framework lesson plan, when that is not their thing. Like, that's not why they are there. They are there specifically to build a love of reading. If the book connects to the content, awesome, even better. But that's not their primary intention for being there. So in some ways, we had to pull our pendulum back towards the middle a little bit and talk about how that there is explicit room for both of those things. But like you said, they're just different.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point, because so many of our community stakeholders do want to be involved, and there is room for those folks, but we just have to know that there may be two different goals there, and that's okay.
For sure.
Yes, and in your comments, Nick, the hook text, even in your text sets, you didn't leave pleasure out of that structure, and
sure.
that those are an opportunity even for teachers to use read alouds for pleasure. So yeah, there is a careful balance in how we approach our practices, and it takes close examination of what the shifts actually are and what they are not, in order to make it successful and still make read alouds meaningful but also pleasurable. So I'll give the textbook answer to the real life scenario. A read aloud is an instructional method that is used to expose children to rich vocabulary and thought-provoking themes. Effective read alouds strengthen language, comprehension, and critical thinking skills through engaging literature and interesting informational texts. During this time, the teacher can model with a think aloud, ask a question, or define a vocabulary word. Throughout read aloud, students are actively engaged with the text by making connections, forming predictions, and answering questions posed by the teacher. So that is the textbook answer. And from reading that, I heard a lot of that lifted in the conversations that were shared. So thank you all for investing in that. And now I believe it is time for our next slide, where we'll have a few minutes for you to access the documents that are going to be dropped in the chat, which is the coaching tool as well as the course guide. And we'd like for you to take a look at those, and then it'll be open mic and open chat. We'll give you about 3 minutes to do that. And that'll be our last piece that we look at before we wrap up session. So I'll give you about 3 minutes, maybe 5, because they're kind of lengthy. Give you 5 minutes on the clock to look through those 2 documents. Okay, you can begin to come off mute or drop your thoughts in the chat around the course guide, thinking from the lens of how you might use that to support the Cox Campus training. And then the coaching tool, any questions that you might have or how you might use that to implement some of the ideas from the course.
If I may, I absolutely love the course guide. I feel like it sets me up when I've gone through the training. I almost used it, I wanted to use it as a calibration for what I think I know versus what I actually know. And
Ooh.
so that initial page, I would look at what the goals were, and then in the notes section, I would write down what I thought I knew. And then as I'm going through, kind of go back to maybe see some areas that I could grow and improve. But thinking about this moment, this huge responsibility that we have of going forward, we say know better, do better, and I'm that person. I've done some things wrong, but now that we know better, thinking about how I make this be something that isn't just a flash in the pan. We could go through Cox Campus and learn some, but I really want it to be applicable and I want it to be applied. So my process right now for looking at how we're going forward with our elementary schools is to have kind of a checkpoint once teachers have gone through the module, pulling that course guide as a questioning tool, but then utilizing the whatever it might be for each of the modules, the guide for look fors, and having teachers agree that over the course of this next period of time, for us, it's about monthly, what we would actually see in the classrooms. So then we're going to go through with administrators, teachers, leaders, academic coaches to track, not individually to say you did this right or you did this wrong, but to say, what is the evidence that we see of this living in the classroom? So then when we roll into that next module, we're going to say, okay, guys, we did some tracking. Here's what we saw. And hopefully it's going to be a celebration, and letting teachers really talk about how did this improve how you felt about being prepared for lessons, but also how students engaged in the lessons. So that's, I don't know, and I'm open to criticism, but as I'm thinking of going forward, that's where I'm landing right now.
That was fantastic. I love the fact that you start with what you think you know. The course guide is guiding you through that thought process, and then really reflecting on what are the shifts in knowledge. And then also allowing that opportunity for the teachers and collecting some of that baseline data with evidence, not for the purpose of a gotcha, but with evidence, and then allowing teachers to name, this is how we grew. That I love that. That creates the opportunity for reflection. It creates the opportunity for celebrating mastery moments, which we know leads to that efficacy part that we know is essential for changing outcomes for both teachers and students. Excellent. Tell me what district you're from, Karen?
Yes, ma'am. I'm from Carrollton.
Carrollton.
Yes, ma'am.
Awesome, awesome.
Ramona, I wanted to chime in. I loved everything that Karen said. I love the model that a district leader is walking hand in hand with the teachers and engaging in this work together. And I love that model of thinking about, well, this is what I think I know. This is what I learned. And, and sometimes then we have to make all of that fit together in our brains. And so much of the legislation seems to just point at teachers, But having leaders who are walking side by side and hand in hand with our teachers is huge. And so thank you for sharing that, Karen.
Couldn't agree with you more, Amy. In the work that we do in the field, it is that investment of leaders that sparks that investment of teachers, even when they're a little, reluctant or unsure. It's that leader coming out front and leading the pack, if you would.
Deirdre Daughtry has put a little message in the chat that says your plan will allow your schools to keep one or two major focuses in mind for a period until they become proficient at using a new strategy, and they'll appreciate the support.
Also essential. I know when I was doing letters training, they would say that it was like drinking water from a fire hose. And by keeping that small focus and then leveling on, that is how you achieve that sustainability, so that it doesn't become just a flash in the pan. So awesome. Great discussion.
Yeah.
One other thing that I'll add, oh my gosh, I don't know if anybody else feels this, but the incredible work that Marietta City and Nick has done in leading that, oh my gosh, it's amazing. And I'm resisting the urge to just feel like I'm a failure because that bar is so high. But I do know it's a process and we've got to take it a step at a time. So Deirdre, I appreciate your comments. That was very helpful. And thanks for being the guiding light for us, Nick, truly.
I appreciate that. I also want to call out that we still fail on a daily basis. And as we are moving forward, find little things that we have to change. But the only way we can find those little pieces is doing exactly what you're doing, about having like district level and building level people in the classrooms. Because otherwise we don't know. We don't know. We can always assume the best, but you got to really dig down to see what's going on and be willing and ready to make those pivots, because zero people's original plan is going to play out exactly the way that we planned it.
Awesome. And Karen, thank you for being a light. One light should inspire others in this work, which is why this forum here, this community of leaders and learners that we've built, is so essential. We have about 5 more minutes, and I would love to continue the conversation with any questions that you might have for Nick at this time. You can drop, again, it's open chat and open mic. So either come off mic or drop your questions in the chat. What are the 3 R's again, Nick, from DeKalb County?
Read aloud, read along, and read alone, with an asterisk on alone, because alone just means without the teacher being there. So it can be individual, pairs, small groups. Just means the students completely own the text.
So read aloud, read along, and read alone.
Yep.
Excellent. I'm putting it in the chats.
Oh, that's a great question about the repeated reading part of it. So when you look in that 15-day plan, there are instances when a text is repeated across days. That's balanced, though, with really having a focus on volume of text in front of students. Typically, if we did a repeated reading across several days, it would either be a shorter text or a passage, or a highlighted section of a text that really gave us like the best bang for our buck with that approach to it. We definitely, within the 15-day plan, balance repeated reading, but then also trying to get as many texts in front of kids as we can so they see a variety of texts.
Excellent. And then what are the different types of texts, if you would just repeat those again?
Yes, so I'll start from the top of the pyramid kind of down, complexity-wise. Target text is the most complex. That's the one you're shooting for. It's the most complex text structure-wise, but it's also the one that has all of the information for the essential question. It's the entire jigsaw puzzle. Step down from that is information text. It's a little more accessible, still close to grade level, but the students can access it a little bit easier, and it's usually a piece of the overall puzzle. Kind of step down from that would be hook text, which is a text, so it's a book or a passage. The lexile does not matter one bit. The entire focus for that one is engagement and fun and enjoyment of the material and of text. And then I guess the lowest complexity wise would be visual text, which does not actually rely on the print to carry the message. It is artwork, music pieces, primary sources, where the visual presentation is really the source of the learning, not the print itself, which is interesting because it requires expanding the definition of text a little bit. So we've come to define text as any non-conversational resource that carries meaning. So you've got conversation and you've got text. That's the way a picture can act as text.
Excellent. Love it. And I'm glad that you brought in broke down that visual text piece, because it's important for us to be able to navigate not just the written word, but also images that are communicated. I put all of those in the chat. Amy says the expanded definition of text is important in Georgia's new ELA standards. Absolutely.
The whole
Absolutely.
multimodal idea. Yeah.
Yes. And Ryan put joy is greater than 3.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, that brings us to the close of our session. I'm going to ask that the Jamboard link be dropped in the chat for additional questions that may come up around this session, to be asked of either the Rollins Center, Nick, or Amy. And let's real quick. Karen said, any lessons learned in the implementation of changes?
Oh my gosh, so many. Let's see if I can do my top 3 in like 30 seconds. Anytime we have added something to teachers' plates, we have to take something away. That was probably our biggest piece. And honestly, largely responsible for the level of buy-in we've had with teachers, is being cognizant of their overall load. Put resources where you believe the impact lies. Dr. Rivera is big, quick to say that your budget is a reflection of your values, and being ready to, when you find those holes, fill them. So I know some of y'all heard me talk last time about the fact that we asked teachers to give up guided reading and start using decodable readers, but guess what? ... didn't give them enough decodable readers. So we had to like fill that hole really, really fast. The other piece is the whole pivot idea. Don't be so married to an original plan or resource that you are unable to tweak and pivot when the results show that you need to.
All right. Thank you. You're great at doing a recap in 30 seconds.
Got it. Oh, that one didn't have alliteration, but still okay.
That's okay. That was on the spot. Appreciate you, Nick. Thanks so much for continuing to share your story, both those pieces that were successful as well as growth opportunities. As long as we're growing, that's what's most important. So the last but not least, we have a webinar poll for you to answer. Give us the gift of feedback and let us know, how did we do today? Thank you once again. Our next course that will happen on June 3rd is Teaching Writing to K through 3rd. As always, we ask that you take the course on Cox campus. It helps to enrich our conversations during our time together.